Thank you for spending another midweek moment with the Wisconsin Property Taxpayers. I'm Paul Roseski. Today's Wednesday, November the 5th, 2025. Before we look at some headlines, let's look to the week ahead. Seems like when I looked at all the made-up holidays like I do before I start the podcast, seems like this week was all the longest titles that I've seen in a while. Friday is the National Medical Science Liaison Awareness and Appreciation Day, which isn't quite as long as International Day for Preventing the Exploitation of the Environment in War and Armed Conflict Day. Barely got that out in one breath. Speaking of being overly wordy, let's transition to politics. This week we look at a couple new bill proposals, a few stories on government spending, some recent headlines about landowner rights, and finish it up with a quote from the founding father that served as vice president under POTUS number 2, John Adams. Do you have a guess who it is? I hope so, and good luck. In the meantime, let's jump into some news together. Starting off, let's look back at a couple of very relevant quick details from last week's Marquette Law School poll. The poll showed that 56% of Wisconsinites said they believe reducing property taxes is more important than increasing spending on public schools. That's been consistent for over the past 12 months. 57% of voters also said they would vote against a referendum. That second question, it's also been over 50% for over the past year, actually going all the way back to 2023, which is interesting because the referendum approval rate has still been well over 50%. We'll see if that ends up changing in the spring or fall elections coming up, because I'm willing to bet my bottom dollar that there will be more referenda on there somewhere in Wisconsin. In other news, there have been a number of bills that have been introduced to try and reform local financing. Most of them focus on shared revenue, which is how the state money gets divvied up to municipalities and counties. Everybody gets some, but it's designed to favor poor and or rural areas that don't have as much tax revenue and as much property tax density, so that way they can afford services like bigger cities can. They get a bump in money from the state coffers, and as an aside, when you hear state coffers in the news or anything like that, it's the money from the state's general purpose revenue fund, which in the state government is commonly called GPR, in case I ever use that term in the future. The interesting thing here is that the bill proposes increasing shared revenue, but only for cities over 50,000 residents, and those cities can divvy up about $16.2 million, and that number is going to go up in future years by a percentage change in the sales and use taxes, which I have to figure out how that whole complicated equation is going to work above and beyond the complicated equation that already exists for shared revenue. And this bill will also create a shared revenue advisory council to make recommendations for a formula for that money to get divvied up. I thought it was funny that the committee can't make a recommendation that would decrease the amount of money that any municipality or county can receive. So, just making that clear here. Basically, the lawmakers from big cities are calling to rework the program so the big cities can get more money. They were careful not to take away, just to increase more money being pumped through the system. In other news, there was a committee hearing on a number of voting-related bills. Since there is no place in statutes that say how ballot drop boxes are to be used, there are proposals to either define the use and the security of them, or a proposal to stop using them altogether, a proposal to set a minimum number of hours for a clerk to have open hours for early voting and returning of absentee ballots. That's a different bill that's been proposed. And you know what? There are a couple more, but I'm just going to skip to the summary here. There's 1 or 2% of people that are trying to figure out a compromise to try and improve the system. And what ends up happening is the 98 or 99%, once they see what's proposed, they're bipartisanly unhappy. Either it's too much or it's not enough, depending on what side of the aisle you're on. And so then what ends up happening is nothing. Nothing moves forward to improve a system that works but clearly has flaws that should be fixed. But don't give up hope. There is one bill that has a chance of making it through, and for all you WPT members out there, I'm planning on breaking that one down in next week's Weekly Insider. Look for that email newsletter on Monday. And finally, I have a few landowner rights items that are in the news right now. I'm going to throw onto your radar. Number one is that an artist has filed a lawsuit challenging the path of some proposed power lines in southwest Wisconsin near his home. His argument is that the line would cut right into the sightline of the landscape where he lives, which would impact his livelihood, his ability to draw inspiration and draw and paint nature scenes. Item number 2 is a bill that was proposed just this week that would do a couple of things. Little background. Right now, the law specifically says that government cannot use eminent domain to acquire land for recreational trails, bike lanes, or pedestrian ways. The bill that was proposed would delete that landowner protection and allow government to be able to take land for those purposes. Now, on one hand, the bill's authors argue that some federal transportation funding could be contingent on including bicycle and pedestrian lanes, and this could block projects from qualifying for that funding. Seriously, it's a stretch, but okay. I can go along with that, but to include recreational trails might be a step too far, except that there are Milwaukee-based and Dane County-based bike trails that cannot be connected because they are landlocked. And according to their press conference where they talked about this, one of the people that is not letting the bike path through, not wanting it to cleave through their property, lives in another state. Well, that's all the justification you need to take away every Wisconsinite's rights. Of course. My gut is telling me that the first reason is an argument to support the second and real reason that the bill is being proposed. And finally, I leave you with wisdom from Vice President number 2 and POTUS number 3, Founding Father Thomas Jefferson, who had this to say in a letter to James Madison when talking about what makes a strong republic, and I believe what makes us a strong republic. And I quote, "The small landowners are the most precious part of a state." Have a great second half of your weekend. As always, thanks for listening. The Wisconsin Property Taxpayers Inc. is a nonpartisan membership organization consisting of thousands of small business, farm, and homeowner members in every autumn-loving corner of the state. Founded in 1985, the organization is committed to providing its members with up-to-date information, legislative advocacy, and exclusive cost-saving benefits. Find out how to join at WPTOnline.org/join.